Hey guys, did you know that I have a body kindness e-course? The best part is it's absolutely free. Just visit bodykindnessbook.com, click on Get Started, and you'll learn all about the e-course and you can get going on your journey right away. Also want to let you know that the Body Kindness Classroom is coming. Check out my website for updates. It will be available in March. Because real health is about being good to yourself, it's time for Body Kindness, the place where all bodies fit and weight is just a number. Hi, I'm Rebecca Scritchfield, author of the book Body Kindness, registered dietitian nutritionist, and host of this podcast. Today we're talking about body positivity, and this topic is really important to me because I really believe that if we're going to put our best foot forward and love ourselves and our family and love our life, that we have to have a good relationship with our bodies exactly as it is right now. And even if we do want to change things, or if we do wish our body looked different, that we could still make peace with ourselves and treat our body with kindness and respect. My special guest to discuss this today is Julie Duffy Dillon. Julie is a registered dietitian and food behavior expert who wants to help you enjoy eating again. Using her training in mental health counseling and decades of experience, she walks along beside you to find the right tools for you to experience food peace. I just love the sound of that, food peace. That's something we all need. Julie was Whitney Thore's dietitian on TLC's My Big Fat Fabulous Life, and she's host of the weekly podcast Love Food. You can find out more about her at juliedillonrd.com. Welcome to the show, Julie. To get started, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your work?
Sure. And first, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about body kindness and all things food peace. And I am a dietitian that has always felt a little like an outlier or kind of a weirdo because I've never been on a diet myself and I was not brought up around it. I was brought up as food as kind of this neutral thing that was just our fuel. And it wasn't until I was studying to become a dietitian that I came upon this whole thing of like torturing ourselves and like eating foods that we don't like in the name of health. And it just didn't seem right to me. And I almost like changed my major many times, but for some reason I kind of just stuck with it. And as time went on, I also got more interested in food behavior because I found that so many people that I was working with, and at the time I was mostly working with children and families, that there was just something else that was a part of the food choices. And it was more than I wasn't equipped to really help because I could tell there was like dynamics going on, like family dynamics and stress and mood was kind of connected to the choices. And it wasn't just like eat the donut or don't eat the donut. It was like this, it was just so much more complicated. And so I did get a master's degree in mental health counseling, which really led me to work with people in a way that I think fit me more. And I also think it's kind of cool because I have connected to people like you, Rebecca, who are also against dieting. And we know there's another way. There's another way to find health that actually works, works long term. And part of my kind of career has been helping other dietitians to also adopt and be really, I guess, competent is kind of a dry clinical word, but just like feeling competent at using non-diet type of techniques, because it is something that I feel like most of us are like drilled on as we become dietitians. And I'm really hopeful though, because I feel like more of us, like more people who are dietitians in training know about body positivity and intuitive eating and body kindness. Like it's something that they're learning about earlier on, which makes me really excited. But then I also have this interest in helping counselors, therapists, other helping professionals to understand the feeding relationship. So I spend a lot of time with counselors and helping them to be just better helpers when they talk with people who are in bodies, to like, because I feel like it's really easy for counselors to kind of go with the dieting kind of way of thinking it's helpful and that it's like, I don't know, that's a part of self-care, but I really, as you probably agree with, I don't feel like it's good self-care. So yeah, what's kind of evolved has been this group practice and podcasts. And I feel like a little bit at a time, we're making the conversation kind of halt on the diet industry and shifting it to be like, hey, there's some other options here. I mean, I'm really excited that just more people are exploring it.
It's so interesting when you brought up about helping therapists, because in my practice, I've worked with therapists, and I really don't mean to throw under the bus here, but I kind of trusted that they all knew eating disorders and body image issues. And I had a couple instances, not many, but a couple that were really concerning. I mean, I remember one in particular where she was like, I just don't see why you can't help her lose more weight. And she said something like, her weight is a reminder of her relationship with her mom, and she's ready to move on and shed this layer. And I just felt so bad for our mutual client, because this was a powerful CEO in DC and, achieved high education, life success, like all these things that we think tick off the box of life satisfaction. And she was suffering so miserably and already like avoiding the office cupcakes that were brought in as sort of, somebody's birthday and a celebration. And sometimes it can be challenging when people just aren't aware of the potential harms that they can do when they promote the idea that there is, benefit to actively pursuing weight loss as the goal and as the marker of this means you're healthier.
And this means that you've successfully moored the relationship that you don't have with your mother, like with that person. And, I think the thing that's really helpful about people who are therapists or counselors or other helping professionals is they are typically trained on social justice issues. They have a broad understanding of family dynamics. Yet, just like in most nutrition programs, there's not a removal of the diet filter or that the weight normative or like that weight loss equals healthy, that they're still looking through that kind of lens. And it's not challenged typically unless they're lucky enough to have a Hays person in their faculty. I mean, I feel like that's probably really rare. So these kind of conversations I think are really helpful because I find that unlike most physicians and dietitians that I work with, I think counselors are ones that are more easily can connect to a weight neutral or weight inclusive approach because of the social justice awareness that they have. And they can understand, this is, looking at it as a weight loss, as health is something that's oppressing someone and it's hurting them. I think they'll get that sooner. So I feel like we just need to keep working and kind of be a little bug in their ear. But yeah, I think it's something that if we miss out on it, like especially as a counselor, it's something that can really prevent clients from really healing. I mean, it's because for that client you're describing, weight loss is not a behavior. Like no matter what she does, you don't know, like what if her weight is just supposed to be that way? Or what if, who knows? It could be so many different things. So even if she does everything quote unquote right, her weight may never change. Does that mean then she's not healthy or she hasn't mourned this relationship that never was supposed to be this horrible, of course not. So we definitely need to keep talking.
Yeah. And really get aligned, right? Because it's confusing for the client too, if there's two different approaches. But yeah. And then with what you brought up earlier with respect to, going to school to become a dietitian, we were opposite. So like you were showing up like something's wrong here. Like this doesn't feel right to me. And I was like in heaven with all the calorie counts and grams of protein and 2.2 and grams per kilogram, whatever. I mean, my first undergrad was in chemistry and math. So I did love calculation in general, but I was just a big time dieter. So I was like, I felt great through the nutrition school. It was really when I guess I did my own healing with emotional eating, but then also, so I kind of stopped doing the diety stuff, but was still doing it for clients, which is my point that you brought up about helping other dietitians. And I would say I would put trainers in this category too, because, I'm a certified personal trainer too. We think that it's our job to give people what they want. And it's very confusing being part of diet culture and even acknowledging like we know and have science to say fruits and vegetables are good for you and that there's value in eating fiber and all these things that are good for your body, right? And so it can feel confusing because there is good science about, nutritious foods and patterns of eating, but what we don't get taught enough, I mean, we don't get taught about the true science of size diversity, the fact that you could be healthy at a wide variety of sizes, about pursuing behavior. I mean, there's so much we don't do that we're kind of taught to be diet pushers. And then to go against what may have been our life beliefs is very challenging. And to figure out, well, what are we supposed to do, even if, because see, I was feeling this with my clients, like things were just falling apart in our relationship, and they would hide things when they, made a mistake that they thought I'd be upset about. And it really wasn't a healthy relationship. And I realized what I was doing wasn't healthy, but there was a strong sense of fear of, what am I even supposed to do? Is that the right thing? Am I really helping them? And oh my gosh, who's ever heard of a non-diet dietitian? Now this was 7 or so years ago. So I do agree with you. It's changing, but it is hard. And I want to acknowledge that. What are your thoughts on that the sort of twist, from a dietitian's perspective, or any helping professional really, where it's like you're in diet culture and we know that there is a certain amount of science that promotes healthy behaviors, but I feel like we twist it up when we make it about weight loss.
Right. Well, to answer your question, I feel like I myself was also a diet pusher.
Because you were told this is what you need to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's what training was. And so I thought I just didn't really know what I was talking about before, when I didn't really believe in dieting and torture. But I feel like that was a time where I didn't really have my voice yet. And we're really young at that point. At least I was. That was my undergraduate. So I was, my early 20s. And so I believed that I just had to push people into dieting. And I found the same thing, that even though I thought this was something that people could do to help themselves feel more wellness, and it was like an act of love for them and self-love, what I came down to is I noticed there was more shame, there was more self-hatred, and there was not wanting to come back to appointments. Or if they did come back, I would see visibly like shame on their face. And I'm like, this isn't really good. This is not something that is health promoting, because I have always stuck with this belief that shame never promotes health. Shame is not something that helps us connect with our joy. Somehow I've always stayed true to that. And so for a good 3 years, I was a diet pusher too, Rebecca. I mean, I feel ashamed of that myself, that there was people I put down this path of disordered eating. And, I'm trying really hard to just forgive myself on that, because I thought I was doing the best thing at the time. But I think the more that we as dietitians, as we could become aware that this like shaming kind of act of like, do these really positive behaviors, but also expect these outcomes of weight loss. But if you don't get them, then you're doing it wrong. Like once we realize that that's just not working and not helpful, to be a part of this kind of message in our career is that, size diversity is an act of self-love, not only for each person like individually, but then for the whole world. If people are allowed to feel at home in their own skin, no matter what the size they are, I think it just makes everything better. I feel really kumbaya right now, but I feel like it's something that if people can feel at home in like whatever skin they're in right now, it's something then that keeps them like less distracted from, okay, like maybe I want to eat more fruits and vegetables, then they can really focus on those behaviors instead of like what that stupid scale says,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I really like what you said about, I think it's the condition of it. So if you do these things, you will lose weight. And if you don't, it's going to be your fault. And that is, I think, the crux of where we make the mistake as health professionals is, how do we really know? Like, why are we promising weight loss that we can't necessarily guarantee? Because we know that it's not a mathematical equation. And I think it's fear, because we want to give people what they want, or we might have some clients who lose weight. And so we focus on that. And to me, that it's that issue of control. Like, I don't want a person to feel bad if they're changing their habits and losing weight. I'm observing that weight loss, right? And I feel I actually have to do more work to help them, feel worthy no matter what when they are losing weight, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have someone who's changing habits who might not be losing weight or even gaining weight because they were weight suppressed, and, feeling that that's okay too, that their big picture of health is not that number.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you said, I think hits the nail on the head too. Like calories in, calories out is not actually how it works. I don't think our bodies are that simple. And there's a group of women that I specialize in working with, women with polycystic ovarian syndrome. And I feel like that's the group of women, when I started really working with more women with this, I noticed that the calories in, calories out really did not work with them. So there were women who were really restricting their intake, and they were still way above the weight that their doctor wanted. And, you can hear that with just like one or two people and think maybe they're just not telling me everything. But after like 30 women say that, I'm like, I think I need to listen to what they're saying. And yeah, so I think by the world just oversimplifying, if someone just eats less or exercises more, then they lose weight. Like, I think if we can just appreciate that that's actually not scientifically accurate, then, weight loss is not something that is simple, and it's very complex, and food behavior is very complex as well. Then I think the conversation can change to be more of what you and I are saying, that let's just work on our behaviors. Let's work on taking care of ourselves and our self-care and help ourselves be healthier. If people just didn't rely on that very simple kind of math, I think things would change.
Yeah. Well, why do you think that, so many of us equate, whether it's dieting? I mean, I'm still using the word dieting, but I feel like even the trend is like, it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle, which, it's a diet in disguise. Okay. It's one thing to say, I don't like the taste of this and not eat it, right? Because why would you eat something that you really didn't like, or you had an allergy? But besides that, I mean, if you're doing something rigid that you can't do forever, that doesn't involve you making a decision about pleasure and joy, then it's a diet. And that includes those, clean eating type of a plan. But so often we say, this is good for our health. This is how I take care of myself. And I know you disagree with that. So why are we getting into trouble here? And why do you disagree with that so much?
Let me clarify your question. So why do I disagree that doing kind of a rigid eating is good for our health or not? Is that what you're asking?
Well, I would say you and I see it as rigid, and maybe some people who are following us now see it as rigid. But for the most part, most of the diet culture world, right? Most of what we would read in the headline is rules around food, or this idea of, sort of optimal, here's an optimal way of eating, and this is what you need to do in order to take care of yourself. So it depends on what you're reading, right? If you're following vegetarian, then you're cutting out animal meat, right? If you're following paleo, then you're doing certain sets of things. But yeah, so, but we often say, this is good, I'm taking care of my body. And you would say that, well, doing that is actually a diet, and it's not a good way of taking care of yourself. So yeah. What are some of your reasons for that?
So, basically, I feel like weight and our food behaviors have become something that is more than it was intended. It's almost like this stamp of like, I am better. And because weight has become this marker of health and so much more, I think it's a marker of status. I think it's pretty well established that people who are in fatter bodies aren't treated as well, and people who are thinner are treated, or get paid more, get more opportunities. And so, it has become this kind of messy thing. And so when a person is eating in order to satisfy a number on the scale or to satisfy this kind of plan, it may initially feel really awesome. It can feel really clear, exciting. I even call it like seductive, because it can be really hopeful to be like, I'm going to get to this place where finally I'm going to be acceptable, and I'm going to get the marker of I am this great person. And it may also be under this disguise of like, I'll finally be healthy, but I think it really is something more than that. And I would challenge anyone who'd say that it's just about health, because I think it does something more. And what ends up happening as just because how diets are, is as time goes on, it really disconnects us from what our body needs. Because I feel like all of us have this little dietitian inside of us that tells us what we need to eat. We don't have to rely on these, clean eating or any kind of like fad, popular kind of plan. our body has that wisdom already. And so when we follow these like external kind of drives for behavior, for our food behaviors or ways of exercising, it disconnects us from what our body really needs. And I think it even goes further. I think it, besides just food, it disconnects us from relationships. It disconnects us from what really matters in our life. I do feel like our relationship with food is a relationship. It's something that we have from the first few moments we're born. We're like learning how we relate to our fuel. And I also think how we relate to food mirrors other relationships in our life. And so if we are having to follow these like really rigid plans, even if they're disguised as this is really good for me, but if you're having to follow something that's not connected to what you need, I think it also is going to translate in other areas. So people will then start to not, just not be able to connect with others in the same way. There'll be a more of a rigidity in that way, and the boundaries will look different. And so that's why I'm like, it gets so complicated. It's not just, do I eat the donut or do I not? It's so much more to look at into it. And so when we move away from that dieting or that plan, whatever it may be, and let our body decide what it needs, I think that's when we can connect to like, oh, when I eat more vegetables, I may or may not feel more energized. And I think it is different for everybody. And what's really neat, I think, in the end, is that everyone has kind of different foods and food behaviors that help them feel, their best self in a sense. And that almost kind of sounds rigid to me when I say it. But like when I guess just more energized and feel like they're connected to the things that they need the most in life. And in the end, what I see as a dietitian from a bird's eye view is that it really is just variety that makes people feel the like most energized. And that variety will have little nuances and differences, but really in the end, we have some similarities in that. And so when we have these kind of very strict kind of plans and however we're naming them, I think it takes away that variety that we really need for health in the end. So yeah, really complicated.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have had so many thoughts hearing you talk. And one was just when you talk about variety, and I'm going, yes, in my head. And I'm just thinking like, yeah. And it's just a far cry from, sugar is going to kill you, right? Which is like what we hear about now. And even bringing up like, it's not as simple as do I eat the donut or not? It's like, sometimes it's not even donuts anymore. And this is what drives me crazy. I just had a client come back and, which is happening, after reading the books, like, I think I need to talk to you again. And she was doing Whole30. And she was like, I really just miss rice. I mean, she wasn't saying, I miss eating a whole box of Oreos or just whatever, like I really miss these things that as nutrition professionals, and that's, people get stuck, like they're so confused about what non-diet even means that they instantly go to like this worst fear. So you would say that, that I should just plop my feet up and eat an entire tub of ice cream in one sitting, and I'm just like, I wouldn't, I would more recommend be present and get curious about what you're thinking and feeling. And that if you're craving ice cream, that think of a pleasant way to enjoy it. And most people don't say, I want to come home and eat the entire thing, because you really end up being tuned out to that, or we come up with other examples, but like you get the idea. But this client was like, I miss rice. And I was just like, let's eat some rice again.
You can eat rice. Well, what you're saying, I think it's really important for, I think, any person to realize is that we are living in this culture that does think that food kills us or cures us. And it seems like it has to think of it in this very black and white way. And so when people like you and me, Rebecca, are saying, you can eat ice cream, I think they're just like, because our society has evolved just this black and white kind of relationship with food and with many other things, that it can't appreciate the nuance of that. And for my clients who've been at diet rock bottom for a long time, so they've been dieting for most of their life, and when I, as their dietitian, give them permission to eat ice cream, they may eat ice cream for a little while, a little more than they feel comfortable with and more than maybe the USDA recommends or something. But
well, that's a half a cup. I mean, anybody eats more than that.
I'm not going to eat fruit as dessert, like whatever. But, so, they may have more of it in the beginning, but like that is such a small part of healing one's relationship with food, because it ends up like once permission is in their heart, ice cream, as you know, Rebecca, I know I'm speaking to the choir here, like it just ends up being not that big of a deal because of things like food habituation. I mean, we know that science is there. Like once you have exposure to it after a certain number of times, it doesn't become, it's not as exciting. And so then people really do taste the food and they decide what they really want. And then they connect to like, oh, well, if I eat just ice cream, I feel like crap, just like if I just eat kale, So then you start moving forward and really, I feel like connecting to really what you're eating is going to be for you to like provide the energy you need. And that's when it becomes like variety, all those things that people probably wanted in the first place. But, if we can just let people come to it on their own and they're on their own terms without all those rules and regulations, then it actually kind of sticks,
Yeah. So. Well, and it's interesting with the examples that we're using, because I've seen people make this mistake too, where, so they get into the permission with food and then they'll say, okay, well, when I stopped and thought about it, I reached for the carrot sticks and hummus, and then everyone's like, yay, hooray for you. And it's like, don't get me wrong. I definitely have days in the afternoon where I'm looking for a snack. I need a bridge to my next meal. And if I open the fridge and there was a bag of M&Ms or something sitting there next to carrots and hummus, that sort of impulsive would be like, what do you want more? Like, it would be the chocolate, but where you can like stop and think, and I was like, I am, I'm interested in something crunchy, and I desire to help, like I desire something that tastes good and help bridge my energy and nourish my body. And it's not that you have to take forever to think about it, but it's like there have been times where I chose something like carrots and hummus over something that would have been, quick and desserty, right? But it's also like at that time, it's not the best time for me to sit and really enjoy a dessert. Right? So that can have a role in it, that it's not like you're only congratulated because you thought about it and you chose the healthy thing. It's like, it can also be, okay, you thought about it and you chose a donut or you chose this and that. Hooray. To me, it's in the context of, so you thought about it, you made the choice, and you're going to stay tuned in and enjoy that. So it's more about shifting out your context. When I worked in an office and my office neighbor had mini Reese cups, and I'd have to go to CVS to replenish it some days if I was like stress eating, like stealing handfuls of her candy. It's like, that wasn't a good time for me to have candy, because I was stressed and working on something for grad school or who knows what. It wasn't a good time. I wasn't tuned in. I wasn't tasting. I wasn't savoring. It was very impulsive. It wasn't really about the candy. It was about tuning in and realizing, okay, I'm stressed out. What can I do to relieve that stress? And if candy's part of it, well, what's an amount of candy that, tomorrow's version of me or 3 days from now, I'd say, yeah. So you got to enjoy some candy on a break and you finished your work. And so there's so much nuance that people really need to explore, that it's not just, oh, you're a non-dieter and because you thought about it and you didn't choose the desserty thing. To me, that's just another way of dieting.
Yeah, because it's like a hierarchy.
Like, do you see that too?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Because I feel like from our perspective, our bodies are never an accomplishment and our food choices are not something we necessarily relate to something we should be proud of or ashamed of. Like we really are wanting people to move to a place where it's a neutral kind of thing. And if anything, maybe it could be, I enjoyed it or not enjoyed it, but not something that connects to shame or pride. And the thing that is really important with any kind of non-diet way of eating is like that pause, like you said, like, okay, so do I want the M&Ms, or do I want the carrots and hummus? And, before we can really make the choice that is connected to us, there needs to be permission for both of those, and if you don't have it, then it's going to make it more complicated. And so for some clients, maybe their body is preferring the carrots and hummus, but since they don't have permission for the M&Ms, it may be better for them to have the M&Ms because they need to work through that. So I feel like whenever people talk about, I feel really proud of myself for choosing that, I don't necessarily argue with them on that, but I do note it as like there's still pride and shame associated with food choices. And I really wish I could like pour some magical potion to neutralize it, but we don't have that yet. That'd be really cool.
Well, and like exploring the context of the pride, right? So if like the eating pattern was normally in the afternoon, I feel drained, I say screw it and I eat something quickly, and it's usually not, like I'm usually not enjoying it, and it's usually chips or chocolate or something, and I feel guilty after. But now they're in the context of I feel pride. I thought about it. I actually chose something. It's so hard to avoid that healthy label, but I mean, are we really going to argue the idea of that carrots and hummus, you know what I mean? Just sort of like what you do more of the time versus less of the time. But if they're saying they're proud of that, but what is it? Are you only proud because you resisted that dessert, or are you proud because of your behaviors? You stopped, you thought about it. You thought about, when you'd like to enjoy something, or that desserty thing wasn't what you really wanted and you'd rather stop and get, a bakery cupcake later and bring that home to enjoy with family. So there's so much context, I think, in that pride, but I see many people using intuitive eating as a way of dieting. And it's like you said, they're kind of like faking permission.
Yeah.
Like I'll say it's okay to eat everything, but I still got to control myself around it.
Yeah. And I notice when people are moving along, when they're moving away from that shame and pride associations with food, what I normally would hear them say to let me know that they have moved past it is something like, I opened the fridge and I saw the M&Ms and the carrots, and I stopped for a minute, and I'm really proud because I connected with what I needed. Like it's almost like the food choice is a moot point. Like I don't even care what it is. It's almost like I chose what I needed and what sounded good, and it felt pleasurable. And after I was done, it felt pleasurable. Another one that I feel I would encourage pride for is if people choose one that ends up being a quote unquote mistake. Like maybe they pick one, but then they're like, oh, that really wasn't what I wanted. And they realize it, and then they kind of don't dwell on it, but they kind of take it as data. Like, oh, I ate the carrots and hummus, but I realized that wasn't what I wanted. I really wanted the chocolate. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Like that kind of insight, and really trying hard to be neutral about it. I would encourage people to really continue to feed that side,
Right. And when you're doing this work, back to body wisdom that you brought up in the very beginning, but when you're doing this work, there's so much more reflection and attunement and honesty. Like you're willing to honestly observe your behaviors without judgment, which is so, so important, because then you can have this space where you just kind of realize, you know what? Like, when I was going for sweets, I was eating it quickly or too much, like I felt guilty after, when all those things, light bulbs are going off, then you can kind of come back and say, okay, so maybe it's not really about the sweet at all. Maybe I don't need to follow this food fear thing, like sugar's going to kill me, or you're bad if you eat that, or guilty pleasures, or whatever that, the vernaculars we have for that. Maybe, if I choose the ways in which I want to enjoy it and create those, like, even if you need to schedule it in, I'm creating, this night is going to be dessert because otherwise I'm just avoiding it, right? And you go through that experience, then it starts to kind of change your mindset. Maybe I can heal my relationship with food, and maybe I can do something different just because the past has been about avoiding and then overeating or something like that. that there is this future where I could feel just more calm around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is. I mean, it's one of those moments with clients where I'm like, man, I wish you were like a fly on the wall sometimes and you could hear what everybody else is saying because they're doing the exact same work. And even more, I would love for people to hear clients that I've been working with for a year or two, to see, yes, you will eventually feel calm. And they came with the exact same experience as you. And one day you can feel calm, but in order to get there, we need to help you to be okay with certain things. We need to help you be okay with binging or feeling out of control. That, we need to help you to feel okay with that and to not punish yourself for that. Because if you can remove some of that kind of shame and regret, I feel like then it opens up the path for you to figure out what to do and, what you want to do with this. So yeah, I mean, I feel like there's so many reasons why I feel like it's 100% possible for people to feel calm again around food, and even to have moments where they're not thinking about food, which I think for a lot of people that we work with, they're always thinking about food. And, it's not what our brain is not supposed to think about food all the time. It's supposed to be thinking about.
It's exhausting.
Well, I mean, it's supposed to be thinking about like, how can we make sure that women's rights are preserved? How can we make sure, we have all these other things we need to do, and so if we're just thinking about food and, our shame with our food or regret or our mistakes, then it keeps us from really like making the moves in the world we're supposed to be doing. So.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I want to talk about your podcast a little bit. I love it so much. It is so unique. I really am a huge fan. And so if in the small, rare chance that folks haven't heard about it, the podcast is called Love Food, and it has this unique format where listeners write a letter to food and then food writes back. I just love that. So cool. Why did you incorporate letters into your show?
So I appreciate that my life experience is not typical. I told you earlier that I've never been on a diet. I've always had kind of thin privilege, right? I've always been a smaller body. If you line up everyone with my DNA, you're going to see the same body size. And so I have worked with folks for almost 20 years now and most of the folks I work with are in larger bodies. And so, I've learned a lot of things from just listening, but I also haven't had that experience. So I wanted to make a show that would be helpful for people between sessions with their dietitian and therapist, because we are inundated with diet culture all the time. I'm like, it's kind of sucks that people only get 1 or 2 hours a week where they can have like respite from it. So I wanted this podcast to be kind of a filler so they can listen to it and they can kind of get more of that, permission and body positivity just right into their ears. And so I started thinking of topics that I could talk about that I knew my clients and I always spoke about, but I just kept coming back to like, but I want to know what they want to know about. And so that's when I started thinking about having a kind of a wrap up with food writing back. And then I'm like, wait, why don't I just have people write some food first and tell me what they need? And so it's been really amazing. I get almost every time I talk to someone about my podcast, like when we're not being taped, they're like, so do you write those letters yourself? And I'm like, no, these are legitimately letters that people write to me. It's amazing how incredible these letters are, and honestly like poetic. I feel like people really get into the narrative therapy, which, writing to an inanimate object is just kind of a counseling technique called narrative therapy. So people really get into it. And I think it really helps the episodes to be helpful for the people that we want to help, because it's really, this is what it's like to be at diet rock bottom and to live in a body that you don't find acceptable. So now what? What do we do now? And so, my goal is always to help people to feel more comfortable in their own skin, where no matter what it looks like right now, and to know that they can experience health and food peace.
It really is a great show, and it's great to listen to, and you can really learn a lot from other people's experiences. And so I highly recommend the listeners to give it a try and subscribe and write a letter. That would be so great. How could they write a letter to you to possibly get theirs read on the show?
So all they need to do is write their letter to food and send it to lovefoodpodcast@gmail.com. And I would love to have some more letters, because then I can give the thing that you and I probably already appreciate is that our clients, although they come from lots of different experiences and walks of life, they have this kind of common thread or common kind of messages in their brain about food and their body. And so the more letters I get, I feel like the more it helps other people, because there's something about hearing someone else in the same struggle that makes it like break its power, breaks it in half at least, to know that somewhere around the world, there's another person who feels exactly the same way. It's just that in itself, I feel like it expedites the healing process.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. And I love writing. I included a lot of writing exercises in Body Kindness as well, as you know, one of my early readers. So before we wrap up, it's something I'm trying to ask all the guests on the podcast this season. What's one piece of Body Kindness advice that you think we all really should follow in order to create a better life, a happier life, and a happier life?
So one piece of Body Kindness advice, I think it is that I'm really thinking about this. This is important. So there's so many, but what it really comes down to is that you have permission to be in your skin right now, and you have permission to take up the space that you take up, and you have permission to enjoy your body and to enjoy fueling your body. Yeah, like basically, I want you to have permission to be who you are and to trust yourself.
I love that. Be who you are and trust yourself. And I even acknowledge, like, even if you want things to change, because people be like, but what if I want this to change or that to change? To shift it away from appearance and more toward about behaviors and the kind of life you want, that universal body kindness question, does this create a better life? So body bashing yourself in a mirror or doing that next diet, all these things that we say are going to help really aren't when we're honest with ourselves. And I think you really hit on a kind of a key point, is that you need to befriend yourself, and so in your point is you're saying, give yourself permission to accept yourself as you are and be kind to yourself. And that's going to open up doors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Julie. Just one more time, can you share with listeners where people can go to connect with you and find out more about your work?
Sure. They can, of course, listen to my podcast, Love Food, or you can find me at juliedillonrd.com.
Thank you so much. And thank you for helping me love food a little bit more.
Thank you, Rebecca. Such a great time. And I really, really had fun. And thank you for asking me to be on your podcast.
All right. Take care. The Body Kindness Classroom is coming. If you're ready for some radical collaboration, check out bodykindnessbook.com and check out Shop for more information. We're going to be having classes on body kindness calm and body kindness food. I'll see you in school.